Hello, welcome to Spotlight on Guilford. I'm your host, David Weinberg, and our guest today is State Representative Sean Scanlon. Sean's the representative for Guilford and that other town, Brantford. So, Sean, you've got a long history here, and I understand you had a very early introduction to public service.
I did. My father was a police officer. My grandfather was a firefighter over in New Haven. And so at a very early age, I really learned to respect public service. I didn't think that I would ever get into politics, but as a high school student at Guilford High School, something hit me in a history class, and I decided to get involved very early on and work on campaigns and work in government. And I developed a very strong passion for just trying to help people out, and that's what got me to here today.
So, before you got into politics, you were a victim advocate, is that right?
Yeah, so when I graduated from college, I wanted to try to go to law school and become a lawyer, and so I figured the best way to do that would be to try to work in law for a little while first. So I worked for a year at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. I commuted every day back and forth from New Haven and served as a victim advocate, which was a very tough thing to see, and you're dealing with people who have been victims of horrible crimes, rape, robbery, assault, and you're trying to walk them through what the criminal justice process is and how that's going to work for them. And at the end of that year, I realized that I didn't necessarily want to go to law school, but I still wanted to continue along the path of public service, and that's when I started working for Senator Murphy and dealing sort of with the issues that were at hand. The problem was that I felt like I was only able to help people within the confines of the existing laws, and that perhaps if I was to change the laws to make them better, I might be able to have a bigger impact on people's lives.
So you wanted to be a post lawyer?
Post lawyer, yes. Yeah.
Okay, so now it may surprise you, since we're a public access station, to learn that our crack investigative team has discovered that you're actually on the payroll of Senator Murphy.
I am. Our state legislature is a part-time gig. We're only making about $25,000 a year, and a lot of us need to supplement that income with something. I have worked for Senator Murphy for 6 years before I decided to run for office, and so now I'm still working for him part-time, doing the same job that I was doing before I ran for this office.
Which is?
I'm the director of community affairs for his office, which means that I get to go out all along, throughout the state and work with people and try to connect with them about what the senator is doing and what the federal government is doing. And also, most importantly, deal with people who are having issues, whether it's a problem with their Medicare check or their Medicare services or the Social Security check, veterans benefits, things of that nature. I then try to help them through the federal agency that they're having a problem with, and we work very hard to make sure that people in the state of Connecticut are getting what they deserve from the federal government.
So how does that role help you as a state rep?
Well, I was obviously very familiar with the process. I got to know a lot of the state legislators throughout the state working for Senator Murphy, which was very helpful to go into that building on day one and already have relationships with a lot of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. Because a lot of people who were having issues at the federal level that couldn't solve them as state legislators would call me and say, Sean, can you help me? Can you help my constituent with this? So that was a natural advantage from day one for me to know them, but I also knew the process. I knew how it worked. I knew how the bill becomes a law, so to speak, in Hartford, and I was able to hit the ground running this January, sort of having a leg up on my fellow freshmen simply because of the experience that I had.
Now, you're on 3 committees, is that right?
That's right, yep.
And they are?
So I'm on the Public Health Committee, Environment, and Transportation.
And you've been pretty busy the last 6 months.
Very busy, very busy. The legislative session actually adjourned last night at midnight, but we didn't finish all the work that we wanted to do, and so we're going to go into what's called a special session now. Usually the legislature is only in from January to June in the even or the odd-numbered years, and then from February to May in the even-numbered years. So we're going into overtime, so to speak.
Okay, so you mentioned a moment ago, you know how the bill becomes law. And
sure.
By the way, do you have to watch that little cartoon of the bill becoming law?
We didn't watch the Schoolhouse Rock cartoon. The state legislature doesn't have that, but in the freshman orientation, they show you a similarly comic video of a young, naive freshman trying to get their bill passed and how that process works. But like I said, I was glad to sort of have a heads up about how that process
That's
played
not
out.
on YouTube yet.
That is not on YouTube yet, but it's something I think they only show us behind closed doors. So.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, speaking of behind closed doors, our sources tell us that you've been seen in the Capitol escorting a celebrity.
I have. Nick Fradiani was a good friend of mine in high school. We grew up together, and we were in the Guilford High School Voices group together, and used to hang out quite a bit. And to see him do so well has been really great, not only for those of us who know him, but the whole town. I mean, to have 10,000 people on the Guilford Green and to be just a witness to sort of a great run that he had has been amazing. And we brought him up to the Capitol a week or two ago. We gave him the whole full honors. He gave a speech to the House of Representatives, which I don't think happens very often. And he took a lot of selfies and pictures with my colleagues and gave autographs to their kids. And it was a great day for us as legislators, but hopefully for him as well, to have him be honored by the state
You
of
didn't
Connecticut.
sing with him, though.
I didn't sing with him, no. My singing abilities have died down, and his have gotten only better since high school, and so we left the singing just to him.
Okay, well, tell me about some of these bills that you have passed in the last 6 months.
So you know what? When I got elected, I tried to meet with as many people as possible in Guilford to find out what their priorities were for the state government. And one of the most sort of promising meetings that I had that turned into something that I didn't know it would turn into was with the Guilford Day Coalition. And they're a group of Guilford parents and students who get together and try to solve the problem we have of young people using and abusing drugs and alcohol. And when I met with them, they told me something that was very scary to me, which was that prescription drug abuse was becoming a rampant problem at the high school and, frankly, even in the middle school, and that it was sort of the silent epidemic because people are afraid to talk about it. And so I decided that because it was such a big problem, not just in our school, but as I learned more about it in every school and, frankly, town and city in the state, I decided, because I was on the Public Health Committee, that this was an issue that I could really get behind, learn about, and then ultimately champion.
So what is the issue? Does this mean that kids are going into the parents' medicine cabinet?
Sure.
Or?
Well, it's a wide-ranging issue. Some of it has to do with that. Some of it has to do with people being overprescribed prescription drugs. Some of it has to do with just people not knowing that they're bad for you. One of the things that was said to me in the Guilford Day meeting was that these kids are taking these pills and they're saying, well, they can't be that bad for you because my grandmother takes them or my mom or dad takes them. And so they think that if they're using them, it's not going to be harmful to them. But when they don't know how to use them properly and they're not being prescribed to them by a doctor, these drugs can be very dangerous, if not lethal, and worse, they then lead to other addictions. And heroin is usually the most common way that people who can't have access to prescription drugs go to heroin, because the similarities between the high you get from them are very similar. So it's a growing problem, and there are really a lot of people who want to do something about this. It's an issue in every single city and town in the state, and I'm really glad that we made some progress on this.
So is that something that's actually happening here in Guilford, that people are moving from prescription drugs to heroin?
It is. Somebody I went to high school with died about a year ago from a heroin overdose. We have kids that are unfortunately experimenting with heroin all the time. And if we don't do something about this, David, we're really going to see a worse and worse outcome here.
So what is this? It's an act now.
Yeah.
So what does it do?
So the bill basically, it does three simple things. The first is that we want to train doctors as part of the already existing continuing medical education that they get in order to renew their license about the dangers of overprescribing and the dangers of addiction. A lot of doctors who went to school many years ago before this became a problem are not necessarily familiar with this. And so we wanted to take the existing classes that they're already having to take and make sure that we just make prescription drug abuse a part of that. The second thing it does is make sure that before a doctor gives somebody a prescription for more than 72 hours worth of supply, that they go into what's called the Prescription Drug Monitoring Program. It's a statewide database that is just for doctors and prescribers so that they can see what drugs you have been prescribed by other people. And this is to prevent what's called doctor shopping, so that if you went to different doctors to say, oh, geez, my shoulder is really killing me, I need a prescription for this, and then you went to the next doctor and said, geez, my arm is really killing me, it would prevent about that. And the third thing it does is make a drug called an opioid antagonist more available to pharmacists, so that if parents know that their children are struggling with drug addictions and they perhaps might unfortunately overdose, a parent can have that ready to go to save the life of their child. And we had a lot of parents that came into the Public Health Committee to testify to the fact that they went in to check on their son or daughter and their son was having an overdose and they didn't have the time to save their life before the ambulance could get there. So if you know your son or daughter is struggling with this just gives you the ability to perhaps save their life if they're struggling with drugs.
So do you have to have a prescription to get those? Or?
Yeah, you have to be, you don't have to get a prescription for it. You have to go through a pharmacist, and the pharmacist has to walk you through how to use and properly deploy that drug. You can't just get it over the counter. You have to actually work with the pharmacist to get it. And law enforcement has this drug, EMS personnel has this drug. We just thought that given the rash of overdoses that are happening, we should make it more commonly available. And I will tell you that the most shocking statistic of this is that today more young people are dying from overdoses from drugs and heroin than they are from car accidents. And that is a very damning statistic that shows you the nature of this problem. And I think a lot of people unfortunately look at drug addiction as something that happens only in New Haven and some of the seedier parts of Connecticut. It's not. It's happening right here in our streets, in our small town, and I think this bill is not obviously going to solve this problem, but it's a really good start in the path here, and I hope that next session I can sort of bring back some of the things that were not in this bill and try to address them on their own.
So that's first of all, it may help save some lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a start in letting people know that the problem exists.
Absolutely.
And maybe we can do more even here at GCTV to talk about that, maybe with some young people.
Sure. And then one of the things I would say is that when I talked to a lot of experts about this, I really dug deep on this issue. I went to Yale. I talked to people who are in substance abuse prevention. One of the biggest problems that we're facing is that people don't know the proper way to dispose of these drugs. And so they end up sitting in your medicine cabinet and a person might get their wisdom teeth out and they use 3 of 30 pills. So you have 27 pills just sitting in your medicine cabinet. And very few people in this town know that in our police station there is a safe, secure, confidential, anonymous drug drop box that you can bring your drugs to at any time. No questions asked. Drop them in the box. You walk out. It's no big deal. And one way that we believe firmly that we can crack down on this epidemic is if we get people to know that there are proper ways to do this. It's not flushing it down the toilet. It's not just throwing them in the garbage. It's making sure that they're deposited in a very safe location. And I'm looking at next year introducing some legislation that would make some of those programs more widely available, so perhaps you could bring it to a pharmacy. People are used to getting drugs from a pharmacy. Let's get used to them bringing them back that they don't need them anymore.
So in a minute I want to talk to you about some of the environmental legislation you've been involved in. But I want to get your impressions now. You've been a representative for 6 months. Yeah. You had more background probably than most people going in. But was there something that really surprised you about the process?
Well, the difference between the state legislature and the federal government working as a staffer for a congressman and now a senator is that Congress debates one bill for weeks at a time. And so you really have the chance to get as well versed on that bill as you could ever want to just talking to people and experts. The state legislature moves so quickly that on a given day we're probably passing 30 or 35 bills. And so the hardest adjustment for me is to really have to do a lot of homework before you go up there each day to say, I'm going to read through all these bills, I'm going to understand what's going on there, and if I have questions, I'm going to ask another legislator or I'm going to ask an expert who's well-versed in this issue. But it's tough to do all of that in such a short period of time, and I'm hopefully going to find a better way to do that instead of staying up all night reading the bills for the next day.
So actually then, if you move from a state legislature into the federal government, you're probably better prepared, over-prepared at a state level.
Well, I don't think that's in the cards for me anytime soon. I am focused on doing this job for as long as the people will let me do it, and I love every minute of it. It's been a big honor to be up there for the last 6 months, and it's good to be home, though, now and have a little more time to get out in the community and really get to talk to people about the issues that they care about.
Well, I think the point is, it sounds like, and I've heard this from other legislators around the country, it's actually a tougher job to be in the state legislature than in the federal legislature.
Yeah, it definitely is. And the nature of it being a part-time legislature is also that on any given day, people are rushing to and from work. And, they're coming late to the session because they had to stay at their job. They got to get out early to go back to work. And so you don't necessarily get a lot of time to interact with your colleagues because they're always rushing off to do something else. And
they're citizen legislators.
It's a citizen legislature, which I think is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
We don't necessarily need professional politicians up there, but it's important to have people who can have the time to foster relationships and really work on these issues.
So let's talk a little bit about the environment.
Sure.
And you've helped pass some legislation on that committee?
Yeah, we're really fortunate as a district to have had a very strong history of people who are environmental champions. My predecessor, Pat Widlitz, was a great champion for the environment. Senator Ed Meyer was also the chair of the committee, did a great job. And we're fortunate that both myself and Senator Kennedy both sit on the Environment Committee. He's actually the chair. And we discussed a lot of important issues this year. Unfortunately, some of the most important ones didn't make it out of either the committee or the House or the Senate. But we did really do two very important things this year. We passed what's called the Long Island Sound Blue Plan, which for the first time is going to do a soup-to-nuts inventory of Long Island Sound. All of the benefits it has for us from an economic perspective, from an environmental perspective, and what's the future of Long Island Sound and how can we protect it? Because Long Island Sound, as everybody pretty much knows, is in great danger right now of all the pollutants that are going into it. And frankly, because of the way our climate is changing, Long Island Sound and the coastal community around it is changing as well. And the second thing that we did was to try to keep our state parks sustainable. The state parks that we love, like next door in Hammonasset, are in great danger of not having the funding to continue to operate. And so what we did was we passed a very simple law that says that from now on, when you go to get your car registered again, there will be a $5 opt-out charge on your registration that says that that money is going to be dedicated in a lockbox to go to the state parks. So instead of paying $85, you'll now pay $90 if you want to support the state parks, and even a 50% compliance rate will pay for the entire budget of our state parks. Other states have done it, and I'm really glad that we took this step this year.
Well, now that you bring up the lockbox, we were talking before the show began a little bit about a bill that's very important to not just GCTV, but community television and public access television throughout the state. And that is Senate Bill 946, which is supposed to be supporting the budget. And as you know, Sean, when everybody pays their cable bill, there's a surcharge. And that surcharge, I think it actually says community television on it. And yet, to help balance the budget, for the last few years, that money has been swept into the general fund. I don't know that a lot of legislators knew that originally. It was one little item in a very long bill. But my understanding is those provisions are still in that Senate bill. So I'm wondering what your views are on that.
Well, I'm a big fan of lockboxes. I think that they hold us accountable to do what we said we were going to do. And I think it's important whether we're talking about state parks or public television, it's important to keep our word. When we say we're going to do something, we have to do it. And the work that you guys do here at GCTV is really important. And I think I would just tell you a very funny story that when I was running for office, I cannot tell you how many people said to me that they saw something I did on GCTV. And it really told me how much your viewership impacts not only political debates, but everything we do in our community. And it's such a valuable resource for the town to have a beautiful studio that the citizens can come and use to do things for the benefit of our town and community. And you do shows like this. So I want to see the funding for your program preserved. And obviously, I think it's going to be a long-term effort to make sure that we sort of change the culture in Hartford to protect those lock boxes so that we're not sweeping it into the general fund whenever we have problems.
Well, that's really important, and I'm glad to hear you say that. You know, we try to be in public television really good stewards of the money that we make, and it might surprise you to learn this floor, these curtains, these panels, everything that you see in this, we like to think it's a state-of-the-art studio, but all of this was done by Guilford volunteers.
Yeah.
Contractors didn't come in and put
Right.
this together.
Right.
The paint on the wall, the control room, the wiring, everything was done by Guilford residents. And those monies are really essential to us. What people are not able to do is go into their basements and come up with digital servers
Sure.
or teleprompters or cameras.
Sure.
That's what we rely on that surcharge for.
Sure. Very important stuff. And you know, I think that the more and more people realize that that's the case and they then value how much that you do, I hope that we'll have a little more pressure on the rest of my colleagues to actually inform us of this and make sure that we do value the importance of what public television is all about.
So tell me and our viewers, you know, I don't know, you know better than me because you went to Guilford High School. I know I grew up in Chicago, and when I went to high school, we had these civics courses, which basically meant you had to memorize the Constitution.
Sure.
But nobody ever told us, here's what your state rep does,
Yeah.
and here's what your state senator does, and here's what your congressperson does. So what is it, if you're talking to Guilford residents, what do you, now that they've elected you, what
Sure.
do you do for them, and how do they get in touch with you?
Well, you know, I made a big commitment to make listening a big part of what I do. I went out last year, I knocked on 5,000 doors, and I told people that I was going to be just as available as I was to them as a candidate, as their elected representative, if I was so fortunate to get that job. I do these things called coffee and conversation. I haven't done one in the last month because we've been up there pretty much every day for long hours, but as soon as you know, I'm done with this, I'm going to go home and print up my flyer for the next one that we're doing. And it basically just invites people to come and have a cup of coffee with me at Dunkin' Donuts. We did one at Perkon Church. I was down in Brantford at the library not too long ago, just inviting people to do that. But I also know that people are really busy and don't necessarily have the time to come and have a cup of coffee with me. So I take email very seriously. I think I try to respond to people within emails within 2 or 3 hours of them sending them to me. I give out my cell phone number on my business card. It's the same number I gave out during the campaign. I want to be accessible to people, and I think that, especially as a younger person, I felt very strongly growing up that politicians were sort of always out of touch with what we were, you know, looking for them to be, and that they weren't always accessible. And so I wanted to really make it a point to be as accessible as I possibly could be to the people that represent that elected me to do this job. And I would like to think I'm doing a good job. And but if people don't think that I am, I hope that they'll reach out to me and give me feedback as to how I can do a better job of communicating.
And what about social media?
I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I try to post as often as I can to let people know what I'm up to and to take pictures of events that I go to and to do things to honor this district and present awards to people. And frankly, that's the best part of the job. I love being a legislator. It's great to be up in Hartford, but I am happiest when I'm down here. This is a community I grew up in. I love this place. And to be able to get out and about and work with small business owners, to help people when they're having problems with government, to go to the Boy Scout Court of Honor ceremonies and see these young guys become Eagle Scouts. It's a very big honor to do this job and to just be a part of this community, and I'm really happy to be their representative.
So what's the worst part of the job?
I think some people would make the case that the worst part of the job is the long hours up there. The way they structure the legislative session is that from January to May, we do committee work. And then from May to June, we're pretty much in the legislative chamber every single day, starting at 10 o'clock in the morning and usually going till about 1 or 2 in the morning. And so I never really understood why they backload everything to the very end and then we're staying there very late. But I would say that that is one of the challenging things. But listen, I don't want to complain. It's the honor of my life to serve the people of Guilford and Brantford up there. And when I drive home every day, I leave the Capitol proud of the fact that I get to be sitting up there on behalf of the 30,000 people that I represent.
So, 6 months you've accomplished a great deal. What are your plans for the rest of your term? You mentioned some of them already.
Yeah, one of the things that I said last year during the campaign was that I wanted to go to Hartford to work with Republicans, not to fight them. And I heard from so many people that they're just disgusted with government in the sense that all we do is fight each other. And so I really was conscious of that. A guy actually who lives downtown Guilford called me into his house when I was door knocking, and he said, "Kid, I'm going to give you some advice. I want you to sit down and eat lunch with a Republican as often as you possibly can." So I held him to that. I did that. And of the 15 pieces of legislation that I either co-sponsored or helped write, 13 of them were co-sponsored by Republicans. So 80% of the work that I did this year in Hartford was bipartisan. And that's something I'm frankly really proud of, and I think we need to do more of.
What did you order for lunch?
What did I order for lunch? Well, we have a great cafeteria in Hartford that we go to when we're in session, and I'm really fond of the buffalo chicken wrap up there. So,
okay, so working with Republicans, and one thing that I notice, I've lived in Guilford about 10 years now, and one thing I notice is that compared to the national scene, we're very civil.
Yeah.
So what is it that happens here, do you think, that doesn't happen in the national?
Well, just speaking at the local level, I have a great relationship with the first selectman, Joe Mazza. I think that he's doing a great job as our first selectman, and we work very closely together to make sure that Guilford's priorities at the state level are met and vice versa. And whether it's looking at bills that he has concerns about from the town's perspective or trying to get, the DOT to come fix a road, we're working hand in hand together. And that's the kind of bipartisan relationship that we need more of. But it all comes back to your openness to do that. In Washington, a lot of people score political points by going on either MSNBC or Fox News and bashing the other side to get TV ratings, instead of talking to each other and having a sandwich in the cafeteria of the legislature. We need more of that in Washington. But we're doing a pretty good job in Hartford. Of course, we're going to disagree on things. There are things that I disagree with the other side of the aisle on, but where I think at the end of the day, people want us to be is working together. And at the end of the day, I have my party, you have your party, but where can we sit down in chairs like this and try to hammer out a compromise to get the job done for the people of Connecticut?
So we have a bash-free zone here.
We try.
So what do you want to tell citizens about how to make their government work better? We put so much responsibility on government.
Yeah.
But what's the responsibility of citizens to make the state legislature and the state government work?
Well, I tell people all the time. A couple weeks ago, Senator Kennedy and I had a roundtable for Small Business Week with about 30 or 40 Guilford small business owners, and they had a lot of concerns about what we were doing up in Hartford. And I said to them a very simple request, is that if you have concerns, I want you to share them with me. That's why I put my cell phone out there. That's why I respond to emails on my iPhone as soon as I possibly can. I think there was about 4,000 bills introduced in the legislature this year. And I do not have time to become an expert on 4,000 bills. But if you are an expert in the bill that's going to impact your industry or your family or anything like that, I just ask that you text me, you call me, you email me, and just let me know that I should be paying attention to this, because sometimes when we're up there, it's hard to know what our constituents feel about a certain bill because we necessarily haven't heard from them. So we have to use our judgment, but I always prefer, again, back to listening, to hear from people directly and then make decisions based off that. And there's a lot of times where I have thought I was going to vote one way on a bill, and then I hear from some people in the district and I change my mind about it. And I'm always open to doing that, but it just requires somebody to reach out to me and let me know how they feel.
So people actually need to do their own homework. You're saying you're going to listen to it, but there's no way that you can keep up with 4,000 bills.
It's hard to do, but people are pretty well informed, and I think a lot of times also in government people think that people aren't paying attention. But people read the newspaper, people watch the nightly news, They get emails from their friends, they find out about things, and you'd be surprised at the level of context that I've gotten. I'd say on the state budget in the last week alone, I probably got close to 400 or 500 emails from constituents just in 1 week's period of time, giving me their thoughts on the state budget and other things that we were doing up in Hartford.
And what are your thoughts on the state budget?
You know, Connecticut is in a tough situation. We have a deficit right now in the state of Connecticut. The governor and the legislature had a very enviable task to try to balance that budget and do so harming the least amount of people. But at the end of the day, I did vote no on the state budget, was one of only 9 Democrats to do so. And I did so primarily because I didn't think that while I supported a lot of things that were in the budget, like protecting services for mental health, for those with disabilities, our libraries, our parks, that some of the tax increases that were part of that budget were not right for this district and not right for the state of Connecticut at this time. And we've had a very difficult time coming back from the recession of a couple years ago. And I think that we really need to get our economy moving again in Connecticut before we look at doing some other things that might have a harmful impact. But I do recognize the tough challenge of passing a budget, and I don't envy their position. But as the legislator for this district, I believed pretty strongly that a no vote was what the people wanted to see and what I thought was the right thing to do, and that's why I cast my vote.
And so now you're going into overtime.
We're going into overtime, yes. There are a lot of things that we didn't get to in the session this year, and primarily that was because it was such a tricky budget session here. But I think as we get more into that, we will pass some bills, and my hope is that in the future, we can do things to address the average concerns of middle-class families. And I tried as much as I possibly could to be up there as a voice for them. We passed some really good things. We passed a student loan bill of rights that says from now on, Connecticut is the first state in the country who has somebody who's dedicated to answering problems with student loans. A lot of people I met on the campaign trail have those issues. We passed a bill for seniors to give them help with caregivers when they come home from the hospital. A lot of times people come from the hospital, they just had a big surgery, and they're pushed out the door because that's how insurance works these days. This says that from now on, they have to designate if you want a caregiver for you.
Is this money follows the person?
It's not money follows the person. This basically just says that if your wife had a surgery for her hip, that if she wanted to designate you as her caregiver, Yale or whatever hospital you went to would have to sit down with you and say, this is how you're going to take care of her. This is how you should do X, Y, Z, so that you and your wife don't get home and say, geez, honey, I don't know what we're going to do next. So we're trying to make progress on a lot of issues. We passed a huge bill this year in the Public Health Committee and the legislature that is a transformational, historic bill to try to bring transparency to healthcare. Facility fees are a very big problem I heard a lot about on the campaign trail last year, where people are getting whacked with big charges when they go to the doctor from now on. We make that process more transparent. We're setting up a website that people can go on and look up how much things cost with healthcare so they can compare whether they're going to go to Middlesex Hospital or Yale to do so. It addresses surprise billing, which is a big problem for people who, I had a guy last year say to me that he had a heart attack. They brought him to the hospital, and the coverage was actually out of network. So he got a bill for $54,000 from Yale for this thing in an emergency. This bill says that if you are in an emergency situation, you cannot be charged for an out-of-network price. And so I think my focus up in Hartford is to try to do things to help the middle-class families and the people who live in this district, because that's the family that I grew up in here, and it's the families that I want to be an advocate for up in Hartford. And some of these bills are really good starts in a way of addressing some of the biggest concerns that people have, whether it's healthcare, whether it's the environment, whether it's just jobs in the economy.
So we've talked about public health, we talked about environment. What about transportation? Transportation's the other committee?
That's the last one. One of the things that in the budget, while I did vote no, I do strongly commend that the governor has made transportation a very big priority of his. And I think that in the long term of Connecticut, investing in our roads and bridges and our infrastructure is going to be one of the ways that we are going to advance ourselves as a state. And I heard a lot about the fact, especially given the fact that we're right on 95, people are frustrated with sitting in traffic all the time. They want to see rail. They want to see affordable public transportation. They want to see reliable public transportation. But first and foremost, we got to fix the roads and the bridges and the rest of the things that we have in our state to make sure that they are up to par. Because I think when businesses are looking at states to go into, they don't want to go to a place that has a crumbling infrastructure. They want to go to a place that their employees can get around very easily and go to and from their jobs without the hassle of sitting in traffic for 3.5 hours on a Monday.
Now, what have you done to bring more business into the state?
Well, I think it starts with our attitude. I think one of the more controversial aspects of the budget was that we increased taxes on big business. And listen, I'm somebody who firmly believes that those who can afford to pay their fair share should do so. GE is a company right now that when we pronounced this budget, they said that they would consider leaving the state of Connecticut. But right now they pay zero in taxes. And I think that that's wrong. However, at the same time, I don't want those jobs to leave Connecticut. And those businesses and our hospitals and the citizens of the state were asked to pay a lot in taxes 4 years ago when the governor first got into office. And I think that while there may be a time and place to address the fact that GE pays $0 in taxes, I don't think the time is now to add any additional burdens onto them if that's going to be the make or break whether they stay here and continue to employ thousands and thousands of middle-class people in the state.
What do you think is behind, this is a philosophical question, but this idea that, well, we shouldn't have to, it's not just big business, but we're big business.
Yeah.
We shouldn't have to pay any taxes. Let these other citizens carry the burden.
Right. Well, there's a big debate that's happening in the country right now about this. Elizabeth Warren, as the United States Senator, that talks a lot about this. And I think that a lot of people who are sort of the middle class in this country have a lot of problems with the fact that, we have a stock market that's doing very well, for example, and a lot of people doing very well on Wall Street, but they're not necessarily feeling the effects of that on Main Street. And so the debate in politics right now in government is how can we try to address that problem? And there are some people who believe that if we cut all taxes, that'll go. And there are some people who believe that we have to tax to spend money on programs. I think we have to find the solution in the middle. And that's why I have been trying to work across the aisle, because I think that just saying what the Democratic Party line is not always the right thing to do, nor is saying what the Republican Party line is. It's working together to address these problems. And I think that that's what the people want to see. They may be Democrats, they may be Republicans, they may be independents. But that doesn't mean that everything they agree with is what their party does. People more and more, last year when I went up to doors, people would say to me every single day, I vote for the person now, not the party. They want to see the right candidate who thinks and talks and does the things that they want to see a politician doing. And part of the reason why I value listening so much is that when the moods change and when people change the attitudes on an issue, I want to know about it so that I can be more attuned to what their concerns are and then hopefully address them, whether it's in Hartford or anywhere else in government.
So, again, if people want to, you mentioned that you try to answer your email as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
So what is your email? Why don't you look right into that camera and tell
My
people
email
your email?
is very simple. It's Sean, S-E-A-N, Scanlon, S-C-A-N-L-O-N, @cga.ct.gov. I do my best to get to that email as much as I possibly can. My office number in Hartford is 860-240-8585. And to be honest with you, David, the best part, as I said earlier, the best part of this job is helping people out. And I have had the honor of helping people who come to me and just say, listen, Sean, I don't know if you can help with this problem, but I want you to try. And it's the most rewarding thing ever. So whether you're having a problem with the DMV or the DOT is doing work in front of your house and you don't know what's going on, give me a call, shoot me an email, and I will do my best to make sure that I give you all the answers that you're looking for.
Okay. Well, Sean, let me ask you one more question. You have viewers out here. When we ask people, do you watch GCTV, everybody goes, nah, I never watch it.
Yeah.
But then when you do a show, as you
Sure.
discovered during the campaign,
Yeah.
people go, I saw you.
Yeah.
So we have no idea how many people are actually watching this, but for those people who are, what would you like to say to them?
I would like to say thank you for watching. Thank you for participating in the process. It's not always easy to interact with government. And as I said earlier, I'm making it a priority to try to make it easier for people every single day. But GCTV is a great resource for people to see what's going on in their government, especially at the local level where you televise all of the meetings of our Board of Selectmen, our Board of Finance, our Board of Ed. But you also do things like this where you really get the chance to those who are interested to watch, to hear what I'm up to in Hartford, to see what I'm trying to get accomplished up there, and hopefully watch this program, learn something about that, and then come back to me and say, hey, Sean, I saw you on GCTV. I like what you had to say, or I didn't like what you had to say, and here's what I think about it. So
before we wrap up, if people want to get in touch with you about an issue, what's most useful to you? What is the kind of information? How should they sort of structure the information so that it's most useful to you?
I want people to be able to feel like they can come to me without having a lot of information about their problem. Sometimes, I'll give you a great example. Somebody called me up not too long ago and said, I want my daughter to take a driver's license test at the DMV, and we're having a little trouble getting a hold of somebody on the phone over there because their phone's always busy. They didn't know what was causing that. They don't care what was causing that. They just wanted their daughter to be able to get her driver's license permit. And if I can help them make that happen and get them a way that they can contact somebody in another way besides the 1-800 number, I'm happy to do that. And so what I want to say is that you don't have to be an expert on the problem that you want to share with me on. It's great if you are. If you want to share me, people send me articles all the time, and people mail me books that they want me to read, and I'm happy to digest that information. But don't be intimidated to come to me with just the hint of an idea of a problem.
Just spotlight the problem.
Just spotlight the problem, and I will go ahead and do the work to make sure I learn as much about it as I can, because I know it's important to you, and I'm going to do my best to help you out.
So you just want to hear whatever it is that we're concerned about, let you know.
Let me know.
If we know something more, share it.
Absolutely.
If we don't, get it on your radar.
Get it on my radar. That's absolutely right. It's the most important thing to me. It's what I value above all else, and that listening piece is just so crucially important to me that any way you can get in touch with me, I hope you do.
Okay, well, Sean, thank you for joining us here on Spotlight on Guilford. I hope you'll come back.
Absolutely. Happy to come back anytime. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.